What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.
Breaking Bad, one of the best shows ever on TV, arguably one of the best shows. It's a show that I didn't get into right away. Always heard people talking about it, specifically on the Slash Filmcast, a podcast I've been listening to for over a decade now. They talked about it pretty regularly. I think it was maybe season 3. After season 2, maybe I got into it. There's only 5 seasons. I believe there's only 5 seasons. It went from 2008 to let's see, does it say how many seasons? Yeah, 5 seasons. 2008 to 2013. I think during 2000, one of the early seasons, maybe season 2 or 3, there was a writer's strike in Hollywood, and the season itself was shorter than normal. And I remember that being in like some of the writing and storylines and plot was truncated a bit. But overall, it's one of those shows that just finds a way to top itself every season. For those that aren't familiar with Breaking Bad, it's about the high school teacher who gets cancer but can't afford the treatment. And so he decides to start selling meth because the making of meth is very much a chemistry to it. And he is a chemistry teacher. Not only just a chemistry teacher, but he has background in he's like one of the best chemists, and for whatever reason, is teaching high school chemistry now instead of working in giant companies. Of course, it was Walter White is the teacher, played by Bryan Cranston, probably his best role ever. Of course, Anna Gunn, his wife Skylar, and Aaron Paul. His lab assistant, former student and drug addict loser, Jesse Pinkman, who just had his own movie, the Breaking Bad movie just came out. I talked about it last week, which was a nice kind of end to the Aaron Paul or the Jesse Pinkman story. Definitely reflected a lot on characters from the show, a lot of cameos. Not necessarily the best movie, but it did feel like an extended episode of Breaking Bad, and just the kind of the journey. There's the main, obviously the White family, Walter, his wife Skylar. They have their kid Junior, who has some kind of disability. I don't know if the actor himself has that disability, so I would imagine that pretty soon that's going to be a complicated aspect of the show. There are a percentage of people that feel like actors shouldn't be able to play different genders or people with different disabilities or people with different gender identities even, which I think kind of takes away from the whole acting part of it. I can understand, if you need a little person to be in a movie, casting somebody and then making them walk on their knees, probably not the best way to cast that movie. But at the same time, you get something like Tropic Thunder, where you have probably the last somewhat acceptable use for blackface ever. But anyway, going back to, so the JR thing in Breaking Bad, I could see being a bit problematic potentially with our PC culture. But the show's no longer around, so, most kids aren't watching old, quote-unquote, old shows. They're watching new shows. But I love Breaking Bad. All the characters, and then there's the extended family. You have the brother-in-law and sister of Skylar. The brother-in-law is a DEA agent, and so it's kind of there's this whole thing where Walter White is this well-known meth cook known as Heisenberg, and he's doing it under the scenes. But throughout the show, like, people find out and things. Like, this show, like I said, finds new ways to top itself constantly. There's also people that are amazing. Like, there's so many people that are part of this. Obviously, Bill Burr became a pretty regular part of the show in later seasons. Also, Tate Fletcher, he's not well known. He's not a famous comedian, but he's a former MMA fighter, a stuntman. If you are familiar with Tate Fletcher, then you would have seen him in like every single movie that's come out, every action movie that's come out the past few years. But he plays one of the white supremacist gangsters towards the end of the show. But just so many amazing characters in the show. All of the characters in this show, the main characters, they all have crazy arcs. They're all involved in a lot of ways. The only character I would say that didn't have much of an arc and they kind of just let it alone was Hank's wife, who is Skylar's sister. Had a kleptomania. She would steal and shoplift a lot. That was kind of one of the few plot lines that they let disappear, which is fine. I mean, she's probably the one that had the least amount of arc in the show. Same thing with Junior. Towards the end of the show, he was barely even in the show. But it's just so good. Rewatching it again, it's on Netflix, obviously, but just burning through it, it's one of the most intense shows. One of the most just fun shows. Also, like the camaraderie you get with Jesse Pinkman and Walter White, or Jesse when in his many times of self-sabotage. Probably one of the most sympathetic characters in TV. Just like tune up and spit out so many times. Obviously, Walter White's evolution throughout the show, becoming a badass. Just so many different characters. Frang, it's as far as being like a drama, a suspenseful thriller type of a show. There's a lot of moments that are very suspenseful. It's just so good, such a good show. I don't know of a show that's really gone to that level. In that tone, I guess you could say. I do enjoy watching the quote prequel show, Better Call Saul. Saul Goodman, played by what's his name? Bob Odenkirk, who's killing it, former comedian also. That's a great show, Better Call Saul, kind of seeing the rise of Saul Goodman, and it definitely good. Also, Vince Gilligan, I think he did the X-Files back in the day, which is a show that I watched sometimes. I believe it was on Fox growing up. I only had a few channels, didn't have cable for most of my childhood, most of my life, really. There's only been a few times where I actually had full cable. Now, not the cable is even around anymore, but I grew up with just a few channels, and Fox was one of those channels that didn't always come in very well through the antenna. So shows like X-Files and The Simpsons, Married with Children, like cultural touchstones of my generation, I missed out on. But I did, get to watch a few X-Files. I enjoyed X-Files when I did get to watch it. And the style that Vince Gilligan had, I think, translated well to Breaking Bad. But yeah, just a great show that I loved and still love. It's still so good going back into it. The way the show wraps up, I love the last season. All the early episodes, they would give you like a clip of like the conclusion of the episode. But, without context, you don't really know what's going on. Like, it might be a charred stuffed animal floating in a pool. You don't know why there's a charred stuffed animal floating in a pool. And that was kind of a thing that they did through a lot of the episodes. And the last season starts off very similar, where it shows you the end of the season at the beginning, and so the whole season is building up to that moment. Like, why is Walter White have like long bushy hair and a giant like artillery in the back of a trunk? But the end of the show is so good. And in addition to that, the Mythbusters challenged a lot of things that happened in Breaking Bad, and they ended up being pretty accurate in the show. The things that he was able to do. And I love Walter White too, because he's kind of like a MacGyver guy. Like, it's fun having a smart protagonist that uses his brain to figure out things to get through challenges that come up. But yeah, Breaking Bad, one of the best shows ever. I enjoy rewatching it recently, and I mean, if you haven't, for sure go watch it. It's on Netflix. But new episodes of The Ray Taylor Show come out every single day. Subscribe on IGTV, YouTube, and everywhere else podcasts are found. Go buy my artwork over at inspireddisorder.com and save 25% when you use coupon code RTS. Follow me on social media at Ray Taylor. Have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful day. Peace out!